the radical Bhagats, Bhagat Namdev, Bhagat Kabir Ji, Jana di Bani vi Guru Granth Sahib vich darj hai. And he says that the main difference was that they also challenged oppression and falsehood, but the difference was that Guru Nanak Badshah actually mobilized on the ground. So it wasn't, Guru Sahib is not just an ideological, he's not just critiquing somebody and saying this is wrong, you're leading society astray, or just calling Babar Jabar, or whatever it might be. They actually then mobilize and try to bring about an environment to stand as in opposition to that type of society. So this idea of building parallel power structures, that starts again, like I said, from Kartarpur Sahib. And this term, Sache Padshah, again, one of the reasons why this book was written was because I felt that there was a number of books that were written in English about our history, but they don't really do justice to the Guru period in the sense of the socio-political revolution that Guru Sahib started. But if you look at all of our Puratan Somme, jehde sade Puratan Granth hai, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ we can have a discussion about whether what's written is right or wrong, but one thing they all do is they refer to Guru Sahib as Sache Padshah. And actually, in Panth Prakash, at the very beginning, Ratan Singh Pangu, he describes an interaction that he has with the colonial officer, Captain Murray. Because Captain Murray, who gave the Sikhs the authority to rule? And Ratan Singh Pangu says that was Sache Padshah. And then Captain Murray says, who is this Sache Padshah? And he says, Guru Nanak Padshah. Captain Murray says, oh, I thought that Guru Nanak Padshah was just a fakir, just a sant, just a saint. What did he know about political office and governance? And then the response that Ratan Singh Pangu gives, he says, Hame kahe wo shehen ko shah, deen duni sacho Padshah. So it's very clear from our Puratan Granths how the Sikhs revered the Guru. That the Guru wasn't just, in terms of bringing this spirituality and naam and gyan, but they were also, challenging oppressive structures of power. And again, not just talking about it, but actually mobilizing on the ground as well. And this again comes up in Gurbani, Nanak Raj Jalaya Sachakot Satani Nivde Satta Balmandivar. So again, it's very clear in Gurbani and the Puratan Somme how Guru Sahib was mobilizing on the ground and trying to establish a Raj, or established a Raj. And then what happens, what we see is then that continues with the other Guru Sahiban. So Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj, they're actually asked to set up in Khadur Sahib. And even that decision was quite strategic, because in our Itihas we find out that Guru Nanak Badshah's sons are vying for the throne as well. So to avoid that initial conflict, they asked Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj to go to Khadur Sahib. So they set up their darbar in Khadur Sahib. And so they're avoiding conflict, but also that gives them the freedom to continue to nurture that environment where the Gurmukhs can exist. And often I think of like an example of how that might have been. And for me, living in the West, the experience I can have to that is when we go to Sikhi camps. Whenever we go to a Sikhi camp and you're in that environment for 4 days, 5 days, and everything is centered around Guru Sahib, Langar, Pangat, all the Vichar, that's how I can relate to it. Because otherwise it becomes very difficult to obviously live in these westernized societies where you're working maybe Monday to Friday and you go to the Gurdwara perhaps at the weekend. And there is that disconnect there. But this is why this environment was so important. And that environment had to be independent. It had to be, again, Bhai Gurdas uses the word behmotaj. Behmotaj Raj kar aaya. And behmotaj is a Farsi da shabd hai, and it's comprised of 2 words. Mohtaj, which means when you're reliant on something or somebody, and behmotaj means self-reliant. So Bhai Gurdas ji sanu dasde ne ki that's the type of society, the type of existence that Guru Nanak Badshah brought about. So in Khadur Sahib, we know that the Guru Sahib, creates the Gurmukhi script. They open up wrestling akhade. There's a real physical mobilization on the ground. But they also, Takht bet Angat Gur Keen Khadur Nivas Tar Naran Udaran Karne Karata Sopagat Prakas. You can read the English. This is Kavi Santokh Singh. And the reason why I put this in is because, just to reiterate that point in terms of the terminology and the phrase that's used. So Kavi Santokh Singh is saying that Guru Angad Dev Ji is now sitting on a takht. And again, this idea of takht, sometimes in our minds we think of that maybe after Guru Hargobind Sahib Padshah, maybe Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj, but this is how the Sikhs viewed what was taking place from the very early darbars of the Guru. And then Guru Sahib also, they're not just, setting up base, but they remain vocal about other structures based on falsehood. So, in Gurbani, Iltka Nao Chaudhary, Kuri Pure Thao, Nanak Gurmukh Janiye, Kalka Eho Neao. And again, you can read the English. So there is this kind of two-pronged approach where they're creating the alternative to create a society based on the values that we read of in Gurbani, to create an egalitarian and just society. And they're also not shying away from calling out those who are not doing that and actually leading society astray. The other thing that Guru Sahib does is they reject, like I said, so they ratify the Gurmukhi script, and in doing so, they reject the Devanagari script, which was a completely radical move at the time, because the society at the time, a lot of it was governed in terms of, in religious settings specifically, by the deemed sacredness of Sanskrit. But Guru Sahib introduces the Gurmukhi script, and that in itself caused issues amongst the high caste Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, because they didn't like that. But what that also does, this idea of the new script, it kind of cemented this idea of that new shared identity that Sikhi was bringing. Often we say about Bakri Qaum, that Nyarapan of the Sikh Qaum, and again we sometimes associate that with the later Guru Sahiban, but that again starts from the very beginning. And this is Dr. Teja Singh's work, and this is what they talk about, how that idea of creating this new identity, that there was something distinct from the common masses of the Hindus. It also dealt a powerful blow to the domination of the priestly class, whose importance rested on their knowledge of Sanskrit, which had so far been the language of religion. So they're not just, again, mobilizing socio-politically in terms of these new structures, but they're also going at them, ideologically as well, and they don't shy away from that. Moving forward, so Guru Amar Das Ji Padshah, so they set up in Govindwal Sahib for similar reasons, to avoid that internal conflict. Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj asks him to go there. Angat te Gurpeo Amar Das, Kiyo Padshahi Dava Jas, Bai Sube Jene Nevai, Padshahi Dave, Jitan Jitave. This is Pant Prakash, Ratan Singh Pangu. And again, that terminology, he uses the word, he says there, Bai Sube. So at that time, the Mughal administration was such that the region of Punjab was divided up into 22 districts. So what Ratan Singh Pangu says here is that Guru Sahib was building a parallel power structure by setting up his own manjis across on the same kind of level in terms of the numbers. So the numbers were not coincidental. And again, that in itself was a challenge. So we might be familiar with how Guru Sahib set up those 22 manjis, and I said the word manji means, a certain raised platform, it denotes a certain degree of authority. And so what Guru Sahib then does is they send out representatives of the Guru's Darbar, and those representatives of manjitars, their job essentially was twofold. Firstly, it was for Sikhi Prachar, but secondly, it was to collect beta and daswand and bring that back to the Guru's Darbar so that the Darbar could continue to grow and function. So that's something which takes place under Guru Amar Das Ji Maharaj. And also, in addition to the 22 manjitars, there was a subdivision in our Itihas Galandiya, that there was 52 Piris who were kind of like subordinate to that, but they assisted with the overall administration of the manjitars. And Gyani Gyan Singh in Tawariq Guru Khalsa actually expands on this a lot more if you're interested in that. Guru Sahib also sends out Hukamname far and wide. And what happens with that is, before, the Sikhs would travel in small groups to meet Guru Sahib in Kudur Sahib or Govindwal Sahib. But what Guru Amar Das Ji Padshah does is he gives the Sikhs a date in the year. So in the Hukamname, they say that we're to assemble here for Vaisakhi. And again, that idea of going together, again, we think about our year, we look towards Vaisakhi, we look towards maybe Bandishor Devas, maybe even the month of June, where we come in Sangati Roop and we have Vichar. So this gave the idea of that collectiveness. So that tradition begins with Guru Amar Das Ji Padshah as well. And in Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara, there's a very important Var, the Gyarvi Var. And the 11ਵੀਂ ਵਾਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ what Bhai Gurdas Ji does is he lists the names of the Gursikhs who were quite close to the Guru's Darbar. So they would have been maybe part of the Guru's close council. They were important individuals. And again, he lists those. And then later on, by Mani Singh Shaheed in Sikhan di Bhagat Mala kind of expands upon that as well. So if you're interested in knowing how did all this happen, who were the people who were assisting the Guru, we have those names in Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara as well. So as I mentioned earlier, because of the way in which the Guru was mobilizing early on, or the Guru's Darbar was mobilizing, what we read about is that actually Guru Amar Das Ji was summoned by Akbar. Some of you may be familiar with this. And this is Kavi Santokh Singh talks about this. But what happens is Guru Sahib, as such a Padshah, they can't be summoned by a worldly leader just like that. So what they do is they send Bhai Jethaji, Guru Ram Das Ji, who goes on to Guru Ram Das Ji, to go and represent the Guru to meet Akbar. And what we have there is we have various Brahmins, Khatris, there's high caste individuals who are not happy essentially with what's going on, because the Guru is bringing something new, something different. And not just that, the Guru is very vocal against the caste system. And he's challenging their ways of governance, essentially. And so they say that the Guru has, rejected the Veds and the Gita, and he's writing his own Bani now. He's mobilizing in the way that he is. And so they're not happy with that. And the Sakhi goes that Bhai Jethaji goes and represents the Guru in the Darbar of Emperor Akbar, and he's kind of tested and he's asked about various sections of the Gita, and he's able to give them a complete explanation of that. But then what Bhai Jethaji also does is he explains the depths of Ek Onkar, what the main kind of ideological issues were at the time, or what was perceived by them. And then it's said that actually Emperor Akbar is very pleased with this response, and Brahmin and Khatri, I say they've got no response in that setting. So then actually after that point, we know in our Itihas there are quite cordial relations between Emperor Akbar and Guru Amar Das Ji. He comes to meet Guru Sahib in Govindwal Sahib, and there's that famous Sakhi where he's asked to have sit in Pangat first, have langar, then he has the darshan of Guru Sahib. But the point of putting this in is that that kind of conflict which we see escalate later on with the Pahari Raje in Anandpur Sahib, the roots of that conflict are there right from the offset. And to the extent where Guru Sahib is being summoned in front of the Mughal emperor. Guru Ram Das, just moving through these fairly quickly. So yeah, Raj Jog, Takht Diyan Guru Ram Das. Again, that word Raj Jog phrase by Khan Singh Nabha uses the term Raj Jog, and he gives a definition of that, because I don't know about you guys, but when I read the English translation of Raj Jog in Sikhi to the Max or anywhere else, often what we find is that they say that Jog is a reference to yoga, that Guru Nanak Padshah mastered some type of yoga of the kings. But in reality, Raj Jog is a term that's used by Khan Singh Nabha describes for somebody who exercises political autonomy or holds a political office, but they themselves are completely imbued within Akal Purakh. So, jiri o ruhani taqat ya o rammi hoyi hua. And that's then, and again, Guru Nanak Padshah says, Takht behe takht ki layak. That only those individuals who are worthy of sitting on thrones ought to sit on thrones, ought to be leading people, ought to be leading society. And then Guru Sahib describes what those values are. So this is the terminology we see in Gurbani being used for the Guru as well. Again, the Vara as well. Betha Sodi Padshah Ram Das Sat Guru Kahave. And what Guru Ram Das Ji does in terms of institutions and furthering the development of the Panth is the Manji system that was established by Guru Amar Das Ji, those 22 Manjis, they develop that into the Masand system, and the Masand system becomes a more wider, more kind of complex network. But essentially the role is the same. They represent the Guru's Darbar, they represent the Pathshahi of the Guru, which is separate to any other power structure, and they're collecting daswan and obviously furthering the Sikhi Prachar. Guru Ram Das Ji also invites, it's said in our Itihas, 52 traders. So they set up Ram Daspur, and obviously they begin work for Amritsar Sahib and the Sarovar. but they invite 52 different tradespeople to come and set up in Amritsar Sahib, which again shows you the kind of almost like the economic foresight of the Guru, that they were building a different society, and they understood the importance of things like trade, and what that meant for the Panth as well. And what we'll find is, like, again, by Nandlal ji, by Gurdas ji, Patta Bani, they all sing the praises of the Guru's darbar. They all eulogize the Guru's darbar. That's, in fact, the Pats, that was what they were renowned for. So the Pats actually originally, I think, come about in the 15th century, and they started in Rajasthan, but they would go to different courts and they would sing the praises of the different kings. And then they come to hear of the Guru's darbar, and they arrive in Punjab as well. And that's why their Bani is in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. But yeah, Kavi Santokh Singh, Bhai Gurdas Ji, all of these individuals, we get a glimpse of what the darbar may have looked like through their writings. And then that is then supplementary to what we read in Gurbani. Things like Nanak Raj Jalaya, Sachakot, Satani. These are not incidental in there. Guru Arjan Padshah, Takht Baitha Arjan Gur Satgur Ka Khevechan Doa. So similar terminology, similar phrases we see in reference to the Guru. And often I've been quite critical of the early European accounts, and especially the British accounts of the Guru Sahiban, the Guru Itihas. But there is one particular writer whose work I'd really recommend, and his name is Joseph Davy Cunningham. His book, Sikhs in History, published in 1849. And when he talks about Guru Arjan Padshah, he says that what the Guru had established was a state within a state. Again, notwithstanding what the state represents today, that's not what he's referring to. What this shows me is that he recognizes the separate, almost jurisdiction that had been established by the Guru. That they were functioning according to their own laws, or the writ of the Guru, the hukum of the Guru. And it was completely standalone and distinct. And actually, his work I would highly recommend for an overview of that period. The Dabistan is another good, it's a Persian source, but there is an English translation done by Habib and Garibal. And within the Dabistan, they show again the expanse of the Masands. And there's an account which shows that the Masands, by this approximately 100 years since Guru Nanak Padshah, but the Masands by this time were stationed from modern-day Kabul in Afghanistan all the way to modern-day Dhaka in Bangladesh. So it's approximately a 2,000-mile distance. That's how expansive, that was the rate, the exponential growth within which Sikhi had seen in the early days. And that, again, I have to stress, that was a physical manifestation of the Guru's governance. We also have accounts of Guru Arjan Padshah trading for war horses in this book as well, which is interesting because, again, we often think about war horses and battle drums coming later on, but actually it is said that Guru Arjan Padshah was also moving towards that. And actually, we know, I'm not going to go into the Shahidi of Guru Arjan Sahib, but there's a number of reasons given for why the Shahidi takes place. The role of Chandu, Prithi Chand. Ultimately, though, it was because of this mobilization that was taking place and the fines and the taxation that Guru Sahib refused to pay. And even Chandu's role often is overlooked, the fact that he was the governor of Lahore. So his attempts to try and marry his daughter to Guru Sahib's son, that in itself, you have to look at it from the political angle as well, what he was trying to form in terms of alliances. But ultimately, we know that the Shahidi was, I argue, because of the sovereignty of the Guru's Darbar. Again, this is Cunningham. I won't go into this, but he talks about, so Jira Pet, Dayan Daswan, he views it as a customary tax system. That's how he understands it, based on obviously his worldview. But his work is a good read as well. This is just a snippet from Jahangir's memoirs that are presented to us in the work of Tejas and Ganda Singh. Just talking about how Jahangir was aware of the Guru's Darbar from previous, he makes reference to that, they were making some noise for a while. And he thought about, doing this for some time, but he decided to act at this stage. And that's when Guru Sahib is then arrested, tortured, and then we know executed as well. The important point that I want to stress is that there are multiple reasons given, but the overriding reason was because of, what the Guru was doing essentially. And the refusal not to, pay those taxes, not to live under their overall overarching governance. So the Guru's Darbar early on then we can see poses a threat to the extent that the emperor is willing to execute the Guru. And this is before the establishment of the Akal Takht and way before the creation of the Khalsa. So just a very quick overview. The idea that, and again, in the course, we go through this on a week-by-week basis, so we have a lot more time to actually digest this information. But it was the idea of creating a new consciousness through this idea of, in Kartarpur Sahib, Guru needed that space to cultivate the Sikh consciousness through Gurbani. That in itself creates a new identity, and a new power as well with the Guru's Darbar. They're not accepting that all these ideals that we are proud of today, they're rooted in the early Guru Sahibaan and in their darbars. And there was a real sense of empowerment and upliftment as well throughout society. This was something, like I said, that was completely radical and revolutionary for its time. Guru Hargobind Sahib Padsha, this is from Gurbilas Padsha Shevi, Dalpan. So this is from Bhai Gurdas Yavara, Dalpan Jan Guru Surmabar Joda Bau Porpakari. So Guru Sahib is described as a great warrior, as a great fighter, but also Porpakari, also loving and a benefactor. But there is, often we talk about the arrival of Guru Hargobind Sahib Padsha, and we assume that there's a difference now of some kind. And there are certain writers whose work has gained a lot of traction, like shall we say, in the academic world, who purposely try to show the first 5 Guru Sahibaan as pacifists, as sadhus, as saints, and then the next 5 as more kind of the militant, right? But from our Puratan Granths, and when we read those Granths in conjunction with Gurbani, it's very clear that the ideology never changes. The form of mobilizing perhaps does. Gradually, that's almost natural within the development of a new panth. So things have to be done gradually. Sorry, I think it was Hugh MacLeod. Yeah, professor in Australia, New Zealand. The first 5 were different from the exactly him, yeah, that's where, but actually, Hugh MacLeod is the first, you could say, Westerner to say that. But this interpretation or this kind of perception is also found in the Mughal accounts as well. Because they didn't really have an issue really with what the early Guru Sahibaan were doing. It only became an issue for them when there was a direct threat to their power or a perceived threat to their power. But so we do find that perception in their accounts as well. But for our purposes, certainly the point is that the idea... So the response then to the Shahidi of Guru Arjan Padsha from Guru Hargobind Sahib Padsha is that they send out hukamname asking the Sikhs to assemble in Amritsar Sahib. And they're given a very specific task, and what they say is to bring war horses and bring weapons. So this is where we do see that mobilization take place. The Akal Takht is of Guru Sahib taken from the Gurta Gaddi. They also create the Akal Sena. The Akal Sena, I'm not going to go into the battles, but the Akal Sena, so one of the things that Guru Sahib does is they ask for warriors to present themselves at the Akal Takht. And it's said that approximately 400 warriors then arrive at the Akal Takht. And those 400 warriors are divided up into 4 units of approximately 100 each, and they form the Akal Sena. And again, we have the names of the ones who are generals. Baba Bidhi Chand is a general. There are others whose names, Pai Peraji, Pai Peranaji, and Pai Jetaji. But that's where we see then there is a physical force now that the Guru has assembled. And even that move to create the army, it's important to stress here that that move was not as a reaction. You know, they say there's a difference between responding and reacting. This was to further the sanctity and the sovereignty of the Guru's Darbar. And what this was, it was a proclamation from the Guru to say that they were now willing to do so with the armed struggle, with fighting on the actual battlefield. We know that Guru Sahib is in prison. I'm not going to go into that either. But essentially, I think the basis for that was because of the unpaid tax from Guru Arjan Padshah. But we know that eventually Guru Sahib secures their release along with the other kings as well, Hindu Hill kings. Guru Sahib relocates from Amritsar Sahib to Kirtpur Sahib. And even that in itself is quite significant for us, because what had happened by this stage, I've kind of skipped over it, but individuals such as Prithi Chand and Meherwan, they too were again vying for the throne of the Guru. They felt that they ought to have had the Gurta Gaddi. So to avoid that conflict, Guru Sahib relocates to Kirtpur Sahib. And actually, the Guru's Jodh, from Guru Hargobind Sahib Padshah to Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, they don't return to Amritsar Sahib. It's approximately a 60-year period where the Akal Takht, Amritsar Sahib, Harmandir Sahib is governed by the likes of Meherwan. Which I think is interesting, because when we talk about, and we'll obviously discuss this more later, but we talk about the Akal Takht today, and we talk about, freeing the Akal Takht, the Gurus also endured a similar, I would say, period where they were not stationed there. But the importance was again the sanctity and the sovereignty of the Guru's Darbar, where the Guru is. And that was obviously at Kirtpur Sahib. And then obviously we see the continuation of the Panth from there. Guru Har Rai Sahib Padshah, there is no kind of offensive challenge that the Guru see for a little while. So the Prachar continues. And we know from our Itihas that Guru Sahib retains by Sokor Sawar. They always have 2,200 horses. So the idea of being Tiyar bar Tiyar, even though there's no actual battles, that mentality continues. Guru Sahib is known for building safe sanctuaries for wildlife, having medicinal gardens, and then refocusing on growing the Panth as well. So they do a lot of prachar. We see a lot of prachar in kings, like the Raj of Bilaspur, for example. Strategic aspect. Jahangir passes away, and then we see the arrival of Shah Jahan, and Guru Sahib again kind of develops cordial relations with Dara Shikoh. He helps him. So this is, and again, this is an interesting kind of lesson for us as well, because often we think about the Mughals and we think about them all as one kind of unit. But actually, the Gurus did have alliances with them at various points where there was a matching of the ideologies, or where there wasn't any zulm taking place or any oppression. So I think that's an interesting lesson for us to take away, which again we can discuss later on. Guru Sahib also, so there's another one who he has, Raja Deep Chand even visits the Guru. And the reason why I'm mentioning his name is because his grandfather was one of the kings that Guru Hargobind Sahib Padshah, and one of the political officers that he helped release. So you can see how these kind of alliances were being forged as well, and the premise for them. And he would visit the Guru at Kirtpur Sahib as well. But then we know that Aurangzeb soon arrives kind of on the scene, and he throws his father Shah Jahan in prison, and he is basically kind of Jahangir version 2. His politics are a lot different, and he's more of the extremist, more of the fundamentalists whom we have stood against and will always stand against. So Guru Sahib also is summoned to Delhi as well. And again, Gyani Gyan Singh narrates this in a lot more detail than I'm going to go into. What Guru Har Rai Sahib does is they prepare their son, Ram Rai, in the same way that Guru Amar Das Ji had prepared by Jetha Ji. And Ram Rai is obviously advised to represent the sovereignty of the Guru's Darbar, to be fearless, not to be intimidated by the court of the Mughals. But as some of you may know, that doesn't happen, and he falters. He is intimidated to the extent where he changes Gurbani. Mitti Musalman ki pehre pe kamayar. He changes to Mitti Beimandi, and for that he is then excommunicated by the Guru as well. And the lesson that I take from that is that he didn't represent the Guru's sovereignty. He didn't represent the Guru to the best of his ability. Again, we do have like responses from the Guru initially to that request to attend, but like I said, that the Guru doesn't ever go themselves at this point. Guru Sahib also, like I said, with the prachar, in our history comes up that they open up a further 360 manjis. So again, we're seeing how they continue to expand the Panth as well. Guru Harkrishan Sahib Padsha, they maintained Satguru Di Amaldari. There's a really good book by Dr. Trilochan Singh on Guru Harkrishan Sahib. And essentially, what he does is he divides their Guruship into two main periods. He says that the first period covers the time in Kirtpur Sahib, where they would hold their darbars and do the prachar of Sikhi. And then, approving sarups, issuing hukamname. And then the second part he looks at when they're invited by Raja Jai Singh to Delhi. And then we know that Guru Sahib attends to the smallpox outbreak that's taking place in there as well. But I wanted to focus on this from Kavi Santokh Singh. Takht Guru Harkrishan Bethai, sun kine adag badai, chalmal chamakat cholat chanda, pei bandukan, shalak prachanda. This is how Kavi Santokh Singh Ji describes the Gurta Gaddi of Guru Harkrishan Sahib. And the reason why I put this in is because he says that there was a gun salute. And for us, it would be quite maybe easier to relate to the fact that a gun salute in this setting is usually reserved for somebody who holds a really high political office. You think about when a president is sworn in or something like that. So this is how he describes that time. So what I'm trying to say is that it never stops, this idea of sovereignty and Padshahi. We may see different forms of it depending on the times and what Guru Sahib was doing, but they maintain, the presence of sovereignty. And even today, you think about, you can go into any Gurdwara in the world, and the place where Guru Sahib is birajman on their takht, Guru Granth Sahib Ji Sarup Rakhya Janda hai, that room is never called a prayer room. It's always Darbar Sahib. So it's a court. And then we see Chandoa Sahib, Chaur Sahib, so we see a Shastar Tari Gursikh always on duty. That all of these they're not just there coincidentally, these are representative of the fact that this was a court. Nagare we would have as well, a display of Shastar. So that tradition continues in any Gurdwara around the world. I'm just going to move forward through to Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. So Guru Sahib is, we know that Guru Harkrishan Sahib Padsha tells us Sangat that Guru Sahib, the next Guru is in Bakala. But there is some movement here because Bakala was quite close to Kartarpur Sahib in Jalandhar, not the original Kartarpur Sahib. And that's where Tirmal had set up, and Mehravan, those individuals who were trying to cause. So what we see actually in the Guru period is that there's the external conflicts that the Guru has with other darbars, and then there is also internal conflict as well, from the likes of the Tirmal year, the Ramra year later on. And so then they relocate to Kiratpur Sahib, but that's where Surajmal is, and there's also a bit of a conflict there as well. So eventually Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji then moves to Chak Nanaki, which then eventually goes on to become Anandpur Sahib. So what this shows me is that the Guru was very kind of mindful of that and had to be very strategic in terms of where they set up their darbar. And under Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, we again see the continuation, the growth of the Panth. Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji also go on their udasis as well, which we go into a lot more detail in the course. So these two, this is with regards to the Shahidi. And what we see is in the first one is that Guru Sahib is taunted by the executioners. That they say that Jinda, how Ram Rai was, how he faltered, you too will falter in the same way. But we know that never takes place. And when we talk about the Shahidi of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, sometimes we use the phrase Hind di Chadar. But actually in our Itihas, by our own writers, by individuals like Senapati in Sri Guru Sobha, he was a court poet of the Guru, he uses the phrase Srishti di Chadar, which is the whole universe. So it's important how we remind ourselves of that event, what that event represented, what the Guru was actually standing for. And again, often we talk about the Brahmin Pandits that came to see Guru Sahib, and we see how that this moment was the Guru saving the Hindu religion. That's often used as well. That wasn't the case. This was about representing this ideal that the Guru Sahib will stand against oppression. And Sikh ideals are for others to exist as they are. As long as they're not being oppressive or exploitative of others, then we have no issues with that. So a lot of this you would have hopefully covered in a lot more detail by Satnam Singh. This is kind of his area of expertise. But the response, again, is very similar in terms of from Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So they issue Hukamname for Sangat to come to Paonta Sahib, which is another town that the Guru had founded, and Anandpur Sahib. And we know that Anandpur Sahib then becomes this kind of center of both the learned and also the warriors and the fighters. There is this kind of importance placed on both, where various texts are translated. There's a real kind of renaissance of the production of literature. But Guru Sahib remains overtly critical of these other power structures as well. They don't shy away from that. In fact, the first battle under Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj, the Battle of Bangani, the premise for that is that the Hindu hill Rajas want the Guru to vacate Paonta Sahib. And Guru Sahib says no. So sometimes we'll hear today people say that, the Sikhs don't really have any attachment to a particular piece of land or anything like that. But you could argue that the premise and the context for Paonta Sahib was exactly that, because the Guru, again, was showing us that that territory is important. Yeah, there's no attachment in the sense of that kind of more, but it's important to exist as Gurmukhs. So that's an important sikha to take away from that. I'm not going to actually go into the Guru's Darbar because, like I said, Satnam Singh would have done that, but we know the arrival of 52 poets, and it's very expansive. And not just expansive, but actually it's, despite what's happened in the Panth up until this point, with the Shahidi of Guru Arjan Padshah and Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, people are still coming into the fold. The Panth is still growing at a really high rate. And I've got a couple of quotes just to share with you on that. This is from another British writer who I'd recommend, Gregor. He says, in the course of 2 years, Guru Gobind Singh subdued the country around him, extending his conquests as far as Ropar on the left bank of the Satluj. He took possession of the whole tract of country thus obtained, and the hill Rajas, being unable to oppose Govind, they became alarmed, lest he should expel them from their dominions and seize their country. They therefore addressed the letter, and we know this is the build-up to, obviously, the Vishwara. But it's really important that, the build-up, there was multiple battles that the Guru had waged with the Hindu hill Rajas before 1704, before the Anandpur Sahib siege, before the Vishwara. This has been coming for a while. And it was because of the fact that these Pahari Raje, who obviously worked within the overall administration of the Mughal empire, they deemed what the Guru was doing as a direct threat to their own control within the region. And that's something I think that's often overlooked. We don't look at what the political kind of implications of the siege of Anandpur were to that extent. Often we see it that it was, yes, it was, but there was a lot of build-up prior to that, and the ones who were kind of leading that were the Pahari Raja. And I think there's also, that's quite reminiscent of the very early conflicts we see, where the high caste Brahmins and the Kshatris are not happy with what Guru Amar Das Ji is doing, and they complain to Emperor Akbar. It's a very kind of similar way in which they mobilized later on. Despite the fact that Guru had assisted some of these different principalities at different times as well. Guru Har Gobind Sahib Padshah as an example. I'm not going to go into these. What I will highlight is after the Shahidi of the Sahibzade, just that 11 and 6. So those numbers represent the amount of battles, according to Sri Guru Soba, that Guru Sahib waged. 11 is the number that he fought against the Pahari Raja, and 6 is against the Mughals. So it's almost double in terms of the conflict that was taking place. And also, after, obviously we've just come out of the month of Bo, after the Battle of Muxar Sahib, Guru Sahib moves down south to Nandir Sahib. There's also another important battle that takes place that doesn't really get as much mention as it ought to, and that's the Battle of Jajaun in 1707. The Battle of Jajaun was essentially a battle for the Mughal throne between Tara Azam and Bahadur Shah, the two sons of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb had passed away by this time. And what we see in this is Gyani Gyan Singh narrates this. He says that Bahadur Shah approaches Guru Gobind Singh Ji for assistance, for military assistance in this battle. And according to Gyani Gyan Singh, Guru Gobind Singh Ji agrees to this on certain conditions. But he says, those conditions, I'll reveal to you what they are after I've assisted you. The Bahadur Shah man janda, he says absolutely, because obviously at that moment, he wants the throne, right? So the battle takes place, and Gyani Gyan Singh narrates it really well. And by Daya Singh Ji and the Khalsa sent, they fight in that battle, and then Guru Gobind Singh Ji too themselves ride into battle as well. And it's the arrow fired by Guru Gobind Singh Ji which takes out Tara Azam, and essentially that gives victory to Bahadur Shah. But Bahadur Shah at that time doesn't know who's fired the arrows, so he's asking all the warriors that have come and all his soldiers, who actually killed him. They're all claiming it was them. But when he goes to check the arrowheads, they don't match the rest of the arrowheads that are in their own quiver. And then it's said by Gyani Gyan Singh that Bhai Daya Singh Ji or one of the Khalsa then say to him that that arrow belongs to Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And then Bahadur Shah travels to the Guru's Darbar, places the arrow before him, and it's said that Guru Gobind Singh Ji picks up the arrow, places it in his quiver, and he can't tell any of the arrows apart. That's how then he knows that it was Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And then Guru Gobind Singh Ji asks him about those conditions that were imposed upon him. And the conditions were that you are to hand over those who are responsible for the Shahidi of the Chote Sahibzade, the Wazir Khans, and there's a number of other individuals on the list. And now, given the fact that Guru Gobind Singh Ji had personally assisted Bahadur Shah in this battle, which basically granted him the throne of the Mughals, you'd think he'd agree to that, but he doesn't. What Bahadur Shah does is he says, give me a few years, allow me to cement my Raj, and then I'll hand them over to you. And obviously Guru Gobind Singh Ji doesn't accept that. And that's when he says, according to Gyani Gyan Singh, that I'll find my own Banda and he will come and take the Raj. And that's when he travels to Nandir and Banda Singh Bahadur. The whole history of that, hopefully you all know. But the point being, what that shows again is those alliances are still being formed, despite the fact that the Mughals had attacked Anandpur Sahib. And we see the Battle of Chamkaur Sahib and Muksar Sahib. So where there was a benefit to the Panth, to the Qawm, then those alliances ought to be sought. But there are certain conditions that need to be aligned as well, or met as well. So essentially what we see then is, this is a very quick, like I said, it's an hour summary of the much larger course, or 45 minutes. The jot of the Guru is, and the important thing here is that we need to understand that and acknowledge that, because the same accusations are then thrown again out towards the Shaheeds. So they'll have no issues with Sikhs remembering Baba Deep Singh or Banda Singh Bahadur, Bhai Mani Singh Shaheed. But jara Vartaman Samaya, the Sangarsh that's happening today, they have an issue with that. Maybe less so in certain places where Sikhs have more of a voice, but there is an issue there. And it's the same logic. That was that time, that was okay, and it's different now. So it's important when we read our own Puratan Granths that we see those narratives that are being expressed. And like I said at the beginning, there might be issues with something that they say or certain maryada. I'm going to stay away from that. But the point, what are the common kind of denominators? What are they all talking about? They recognize the Jot of the Guru as one. They recognize the Guru as Sache Path. So they talk about the Guru's Darbar from Kartarpur Sahib to Anandpur Sahib as well. And then what we see is a continuation of that. This idea, if we look at the entire 18th century, Ratan Singh Pangu says that ke Sikh Raj kare, ke Sikh lar mare. That's how he kind of summarizes an entire 100 years. And when we look back, that's exactly it. Banda Singh Bahadur, Bhai Tara Singh, Baba Deep Singh, Bhai Mani Singh, all the way to Bhai Nawab Kapoor Singh, the Sikhs understood how important Raj was. And it's very difficult, even now with all of the resources we have, to find any other narrative that dominates the 18th century. It's all about Raj, that the Sikhs are going for Raj. And like I said, it comes in the Republic of Banda Singh Bahadur. Then there's a moment where their Shahidi happens and the Sikhs have to retreat. Mata Sahib Kaur, Mata Sundari Ji, their leadership, by Mani Singh, then the Nawab Kapoor Singh rises up, the Dal Khalsa appears. It's always evolving, but the premise is always to understand the importance of Sikh sovereignty. And then under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, that it culminates in the Sikh Empire in 1799, and we know that lasts for approximately 50 years as well. So I would argue then between 1469 to 1849, approximately 400 years, it's very clear how the Sikhs were mobilizing. It's very clear, and they understood the significance of Raj. They didn't shy away from it. You know, at the beginning I mentioned Siddh Ghost. One of the big critiques that Guru Sahib has of the Siddhs is that they have the bhakti. They have all of that, but they've abandoned the world. They've gone up into the mountains, and they're rejecting the world. And so that's why I said Guru Sahib is not just an ideologue. He's not just somebody who's going to say what's right or wrong. They're actually creating the Gurmukhs who are going to lead that change. And so we see that for 400 years, that's at the forefront of the minds of the Sikhs. And then 1849 to baad, when the British arrive, we do start to see some differences. Although we still have the likes of Bhai Maharaj Singh, we have the Gadri Babbe, we have the Babar Akali Leher, we have the Jujarus of the 80s and the 90s, this idea of standing against oppression continues. So even though you could argue that there has been no Sikh sovereignty since 1849, there's still been a desire to re-establish Sikh sovereignty. And that doesn't. Unfortunately, there was an issue with the couriers. They didn't bring it down in time. So if you would like to purchase a copy, you can still do so today, and it will post it out to you next week. And there is an exclusive price for the book today as well. And there's also free goodies which we'll give in. So just speak to us at the stall afterwards. And then we have other books there as well. Okay, so does anybody have any questions, or should we take a break and come back? Hanji? Hanji. So Singh just asked me to repeat the question so that the live stream can hear it as well, because we are streaming this live. So the question is that Gurmukhi was introduced because Guru Sahib rejects the Devanagari script, which is the Sanskrit script, which is what the Vedas were written in. And your question is, what was the position with the Hindi script? So I think at the time, the main kind of script that was utilized by those in positions of power was either Farsi or Sanskrit. The Pandits, those who were learned, that was the main, I believe anyway, unless anybody has any other information. So I don't think there is a position with that. But the point is that Gurmukhi was introduced not just as a stand against the kind of monopoly that the high caste Brahmins had kind of, held, but it was because the Guru was introducing a new identity as well. And with that, you have the script. So that Gurbani was revealed through Gurmukhi. And obviously, the Gurmukhi Akkar, they predate the Gurus, but the Guru ratified the Penthi Akkar in the form that we have them today. So I think in terms of the Hindi script, I don't think there was a position on that. Perhaps it was maybe associated with the broader Sanskrit, the Devanagari script. Yeah. So the question again is the Akal Sena that was established by Guru Hargobind Sahib Badshah, were they kind of seasoned warriors, or was it? So there was a mix. There was a mix that came in, and also this is where we see the introduction of the Taddis as well. So Guru Sahib then requests those who sing war ballads to come to Akal Takht again to kind of reinforce that warrior, that war spirit, and that's where we see the introduction of the Taddi Vara within the Sikh tradition as well. Hanji. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰੋ
ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਗੁਰਮੁਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੱਭਣਾ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਰਡ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਹੈ ਨਾ I think we misuse it. Word means that ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਧਾਰਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਡਿਫਰੈਂਟ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਚਨ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਬਹੁਵਚਨ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਸਮੱਸਿਆ ਆਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਚੇਂਜ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਗੁਰਮੁਖੀ ਅਤੇ ਕਈ ਹੋਰ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਚੌਥੀ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਬਾਣੀ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ, ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਬਾਣੀ ਘੜ ਘੜਾਵੇ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ। ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਵਾਲੇ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ, ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੈਠਦੀ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਓਪਨਲੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਟਿਸਾਈਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ। Perhaps we can sit down and discuss that, and I can show you examples from the Quran.
Hanji, thank you. Let's do that. Yeah. Question?
I think it'd be very useful, and this will be more for the forum discussion afterwards. I think in sovereignty you were going to hopefully maybe define some words and concepts like Miri Piri, polity, ਪੰਥ, because sometimes ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ discussion ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ it's very important ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ definition ਹੈ we've sort of agreed and we're clear ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਕੀ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ। you see ਜਿਵੇਂ ਕੌਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਪੰਥ ਦੀ ਕਿੰਨਾ slight differences ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਨਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਅਤੇ polity ਅਤੇ governance ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਨਾ further discussion ਆਏਗੀ certainly from my point of view ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ important ਹੋਣ ਵੀ so we're sort of an agreed consensus ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਨਾ because ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ words ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ very important ਅਤੇ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਮੰਨਦਾ ਹਾਂ but ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ you know these are something if you can just shed a bit of light on that be really helpful.
So the question was the specific words that I've used in the talk. So Panth and Miri Piri. Okay, I mean, these terms I thought were quite generally understood. But if I can give a broad answer to the two questions maybe together, is that the overall purpose of this presentation is to showcase that the political kind of activity, the political mobilization, the socio-political mobilization that the Sikhs have, that doesn't begin with the Sikhs. That begins with the Guru. The Guru is not just critical, like I said, of other structures of power. They're not just critiquing the caste's ideology or the policies of the Mughals or whoever it might be. They're physically mobilizing on the ground, on the Tarti of Punjab. It's not, again, it's not an ideology, it's not an abstract idea. It's something they have to mobilize, or they do mobilize on. So that was the purpose of this, because we often think about Raj, it comes later, that that Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj gives the hukum for the Sikhs to establish us. Yes, they do, but what they do is they pass on the Pathshahi of the Guru. And I'll again define that word Pathshahi. The Pathshahi, for me, conceptually is different to Sikh Raj. Sikh Raj is the physical manifestation. Pathshahi is the power to establish Raj. Like, for example, Japa Goryada example, the British Crown claims to have authority from God to rule. That's the one parallel that perhaps I could draw to explain the kind of relationship between the Guru. So, in Garib Sikhon ko diyo Pathshahi. Ye yaad rakhe hamri Gurayai. That in 1699, that power is then vested in the Khalsa. And so we have this idea of Guru Granth and Guru Panth in 1708. Both are needed for the Panth to move forward. Both work collaboratively, if you like. So that was the main kind of purpose of this talk, is that it's not just kind of these ideas that the Guru has and leaves for the Sikhs. They provide the blueprint, they provide the examples themselves, to the extent where they are giving Shahidi as well for the advancement of the Sikh Panth. But it'd be great, Uncle Ji, to sit down with you afterwards, because I'm not sure if I've understood the question of the Gurmukh, because this Pangti that I referred, Gurmukh Khojatape Udasi, I'd be interested to learn what other interpretation of that, because the context is important, right? Okay, Siddhanal Gal Karde, that ghost, that discourse. So,
the leadership there. Gurbani defines what is a leader. It defines what is Takht, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਤਖਤ ਬਹਿ ਤਖਤੇ ਦੀ ਲਾਇਕ। ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਨਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਇਤਰਾਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ, ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਉਹ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ 'ਚ ਵੀ। ਸੋ ਐਵਰੀਥਿੰਗ ਇਜ਼ ਜੋਤ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ, ਜੋਤ ਕੋਈ ਇਟਸ ਨੋਟ ਏ ਹੇਰੀ ਫੇਰੀ ਆਈਡੀਆ। ਜੋ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਸੀ, ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਹੀ ਜੋਤ ਹੈ। ਜਿਹੜੇ 7-8 ਸਾਲ ਭਾਈ ਲਹਿਣਾ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਸੇਵਾ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਭਾਈ ਲਹਿਣਾ ਜੀ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇਖੋਗੇ ਨਾ, ਜੋ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ, ਜੈ ਜੈ ਦੇਖੋ ਤੈ ਤੈ ਤੂੰ ਹੈ, ਜੈ ਜੈ ਦੇਖੋ ਤੈ ਤੈ ਸੱਚ ਹੈ, ਜੈ ਜੈ ਦੇਖੋ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਦਾ। ਹਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਹੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ 40 ਕੋਟੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਐਕਸਪਲੇਨ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ, ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਨਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੋਜ਼ ਥਰੂ ਫਰੋਮ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ, ਭਾਈ ਲਹਿਣਾ ਜੀ, ਗੁਰੂ ਅੰਗਦ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ, and then that concept is explained in Gurbani, Guru Amardas ji, and Guru Ramdas ji, Guru Arjan Dev ji. So you can find identical things with Guru Nanak Dev ji and then Guru Arjan Dev ji. ਤੇ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, that is ਜੋਤ। ਉਹ ਜੋਤ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਫਰ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਨਾ, that is ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ, that is wisdom। ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਨਾ ਕਲਾਸਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਅੰਗਦ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰਨੀ ਸੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਕ੍ਰਿਪਟ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਅੱਖਰ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰਨੇ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਉਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ ਫਰੋਮ ਯੰਗ ਏਜ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਐਡਲਟਸ ਤੱਕ, ਐਡਲਟ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਡਿਫਾਈਨ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ। ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੌਨਸੈਪਟ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਬ੍ਰਾਹਮਣਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸੀ, ਬ੍ਰਾਹਮਣਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ। They control every aspect of the human society, even the kings and the rulers. What they did, what they didn't do, they had to depend on the Brahmins. But Guru Nanak's concepts, from starting from the children to Guru Angad Dev Ji's starting schools and starting teaching everybody, and that was taking away the Brahmins' power to teach and Brahmins' power to dispense the wisdom, which is Gurbani's wisdom, to the ordinary people.
And this will be more a concept later on, when there'll be more discourse. Just give a bit of opportunity for others to maybe ask questions, because otherwise, jade deeply chale gaye. That's why jedi definition I was just alluding, be jedi Miri Piri concept hai, Kal Takht concept hai, that was part of the polity, I thought that there may be shedding some more light. I suspect jedi Virji is discussing more at a personal level, Guru, the Shabd Guru within yourself and whatever. So if we can just move on, Jai horan kol ko questions hai ne, then we can take over for that. Maaf karna. Thank you.
So, how do you, like all of this Sikh party and sovereignty, how does it relate in modern times when we're living in like the West and like, for example, like Gurdwara systems, community systems? How do you find the balance between like Sikh sovereignty, Party and modern times?
That's a great question, and actually that is for the workshop. That's fine. Can we come at that in the workshop? That's okay, because there is some specific activities which will hopefully engage us all in that. Because I could give my niji khyaal, but I want to obviously get the thoughts of everyone. So, but that is the kind of the question I think everyone is trying to grapple with. So we'll come to that collectively, if that's okay. Anji.
For example, they say the Raj physically went away, but last night say, goes away from physical is to also glorify the Sikhs as well, and to make, let's say, microcosm Raj. Does it make sense?
So the question is,
Do you think the Raj is also spiritual and not just physical? Because also Gurbani goes on to discuss the qualities of the
spirituality. But the point was to showcase that the Guru didn't shy away, they didn't reject the world. Because I think you mentioned there about, the spiritual, the same sense, right? But so then why is the Guru critical of the Siddhs? Why does he call them out? Why does he say to them that they've run out into the jungles? And my answer, and I'll come to everyone else, is that it's because they're not realists in the sense that they're not accepting hukam, because they're not trying to address the issues that exist in the world. All of the gurus had darbars. All of the gurus sat on their manjis at takhts. So, and they placed importance on that, to the point where, like I said, they're building parallel power structures. There was no need to really engage, you could argue, with the Mughals, with the Hindu hill Rajas. Why, the very first battle that takes place in Sikh history is the Battle of Amritsar, 1634. Where Guru Hargobind Sahib Padsha and the Sikhs go to battle over the Baj. Now, if there was no real need to that, the Guru could quite easily have handed the falcon back and been done with it. But they took the Sikhs through that. So I think it's important to acknowledge how it was never disregarded, and that's not to say it was given more importance than there is no significance between Miri and Piri, right? There's equal importance placed. But that term Raj Yog, right? Raj Yog Takht Diyan Guru Ramdas. Again, Bhai Kansing Abbas says that Raj Yog is for somebody who sits in a position of power, a position of authority, a position where they can actually change society, but they themselves have to be of certain characteristics. And those characteristics for a Sikh are defined by the fact of how much they are connected with Akal Purakh. So I think that maybe I didn't express that properly before, but that's the fundamental contemporary research. But your go-to would be the Janam Sakhis. Contemporary research, but your go-to would be the Janam Sakhis. The thing is, it's quite fragmented. I don't think you can go to one specific account and read exactly what happened detailed. So you kind of have to do across different sources. So the Janam Sakhiya by Gurdas Diyawara, I can give you a list afterwards. And then there's obviously reference to Kartarpur Sahib and Gurbani as well. But I'd say probably the Janam Sakhis. By Veer Singh's work, Guru Nanak Chamatkar covers it as well. But it's not a contemporary work in that sense. Yeah. Hanji Bhai.
I was going to add to the point of the spirituality versus the political side.
Mm.
The Miri Piri is like it's at the same side of the coin. You cannot have a limiraj if you don't have Bhai and Naam within yourself, because that ultimately sets you in terms of your higher state being, that recognizes who you truly are. And recognizing who you truly are, it's not within, we're not just human. We're just not guru. Inside us is a God book of itself within us. So recognizing that is the same side of the coin. So media is the political side and the media is the spiritual side. So you cannot get one without the other. Because then what? Because you can already see what kind of large already there is. Like, you're in the Western world, in British Empire, what kind of large is that? We're talking about large that's a God book large. It's very different. It's the injustice. But you cannot do that until you have the spirituality within yourself. So you have to do a lot of bhakti. You have to do a lot of good bond inside you, and then you can get that in your life. They will not be, that's why they know it's not Hegel. That was the point.
Okay.
The same side of the
Done, well, thank you.
I was going to say, I understand. At the same time, I'm just, my question is, what's the conversation between the Sikhs, and why do when these things happen to bring up when the Raj stops? What's the hukam behind it? Like, why does it happen? So, for example, when Guru Gobind Singh Ji, when his light merged with the light, he said, that if I understood correctly, he prefers to ruin himself. I mean,
Okay, maybe we can come back to that one. Angie.
So I was just going to add to what you said about like the British Crown and everything. Like Gordon will say, they will say, "God save the Queen." They say that. And I feel like when we say that, we can't say that. So all they can say, and they can say, "God save their Queen." And I think I totally agree with you that it's not just a mindset or a concept or a thought or an idea. It's everything. Sikh thought, and I think different people, cultures, countries have different meanings for what it means to be human. And for us, it's this. Like langar, it's not an idea. It's an actual thing. You go downstairs and there's langar. They're actual physical thing. Like the Qurban, it's not wooden. You just take a picture of it. Just carry the picture of the Qurban, like the Qurban. Like it's an actual Qurban, to use, if and when needed at the right, times, etc. Like it's not just like a thought or a mindset. It's completely interwoven. Like the Miri Piri, it's completely interwoven. Like it's one for us that Guru's given us everything for us to live and to rule and to have Raj. Like me personally, the way I see it, like we can do Raj better than like the Gore can do Raj. The Guru's given us everything for us to live, and then for the world as well. Like like say like for Khalistan, it's not just for us just to be just look, we've got Khalistan or we've got it and we're just rulers. No, it's for like Sadabatada Balais for us, and it's for the whole world, to create change. And I think like on one of your slides it said about creating a truly egalitarian society. That started with the inception of Guru Nanak to us with the Guru Granth and Guru Panth, and we are the embodiment of that, to further that, not to become the Gurus, but to grow and further and advance their cause. That started with Guru Nanak, because he clearly states, as you've said in your you've showed in your presentation. So that's just how I see it. Just wanted to just add to that.
Thank you. Any more? Should we take a break maybe at this stage and then come back for the workshop? So I mean, it's 20 to 1 o'clock. Do we have the room? Or yeah? ठीक है जी. Okay जी, वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह.